Chickasha Daily Express, June 1st, 1921. 75 dead in race war. Mob action grows into civil war proportions as whites and blacks battle through street. Officials in control of situation at noon. At 1:15 this afternoon, 7 whites, 68 Negroes killed according to police and military authorities, 34 whites, 100 Negroes wounded, city under martial law. Black belt of Tulsa on fire. White residences threatened. Governor in trains for front. National Guard companies on ground. Fight starts when mob goes after alleged black attacker of elevator girl. Bulletin by United Press. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st. At 1:15 this afternoon, 7 whites were known to be dead and 34 wounded, according to police and military authorities. 68 Negroes are dead and 100 wounded. Chief of Police Gustafson said his advices showed. By United Press. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st. At noon today, police reports and a check of 3 hospitals show that 7 whites are dead and 32 wounded. Many whites who were wounded are in their own homes, and the total, it is believed, would show an increase in the available figures. 50 Negroes, including men, women, and children, are dead, according to reports from the Black Belt after a check by authorities, and it is believed that 200 blacks have been wounded. Officials in control. Officials are in control of the situation, and no more armed conflicts are expected. Practically the entire Negro section of the city is still in flames, and the fire department has battled several hours, but so far helplessly against the conflagration. Dick Rowland, the Negro who was alleged to have attacked a 17-year-old white elevator girl in the Drexel building Monday, was still in the custody of officials, but it was thought that the Negro had been taken to some other point for safekeeping. Fighting, of the guerrilla nature, continued until nearly noon on the outskirts of the city near Davis Hill, where fire was consuming the Negro section of the city and threatening the white residential district. Convention Hall, with a capacity of 3,000, was filled with captured Negroes before noon and was placed under heavy guard. Hundreds of Negroes have fled from the city. Every train coming into Tulsa this forenoon was entered by guards, and all Negroes taken from the passenger coaches. Robertson to Tulsa by United Press. Oklahoma City, June 1st. Governor Robertson was to entrain for Tulsa at 1:45 o'clock this afternoon to personally investigate the situation there. It was announced at the Capitol. The governor has been in conference with the Attorney General's office all morning. It was learned, and it is indicated, that he would be accompanied by a member of the Attorney General's staff. The governor has declared Tulsa under martial law. By United Press. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st. Race rioting continued here today between whites and blacks as volley after volley of shots rang out in the Negro quarter of the city. Early this morning, the whole Negro section of the city seems to be on fire. At 7 o'clock this morning, there was an unconfirmed report that more than 3 whites were killed, which would bring the unconfirmed death list up to 5 whites and 30 Negroes. 3 units of the Oklahoma National Guard are on duty and are attempting to pacify the mob. Riot started jail. The rioting started early last night when a mob of whites, said to have been armed with guns and revolvers, gathered at the county jail after Dick Rowland, a Negro, was arrested for an alleged attack on a young white girl. A mob of armed Negroes also formed at the jail and assumed a threatening attitude. The situation grew more tense and went from bad to worse as the feeling grew. About 10 o'clock last night, the first shots were heard. It was not clearly reported as to which mob started the shooting, but by midnight the fighting in the streets was general. During the night, clashes between armed bands became frequent, and there was some talk during the night of a general invasion of the Black Belt of the city. No action in this direction was taken, however, until early today, and at that time, the armed whites were said to number about 1,000. An advance on Little Africa was made, and the whites formed a circle of steel around the Negro quarter. Almost immediately, a rifle and revolver battle that took on the proportions of a major engagement started. Almost a continuous fire could be heard. The casualties were said to include 100 whites and 150 Negroes wounded. Some are believed to have been fatally hurt. Bear it off to Tulsa by United Press, Oklahoma City, June 1st. Adjutant General Barrett left here today for Tulsa to take charge of the situation there, which is the outgrowth of rioting between blacks and whites that started last night. ONG goes on duty by United Press, Oklahoma City, June 1st. The Adjutant General's office today announced that the following units of the Oklahoma National Guard are either on duty in Tulsa or are en route here. Company B and the Sanitary Detachment, 200 men of Tulsa. Companies A and D, comprising a force of 150 men of Oklahoma City.
Evening Capital, June 1st, 1921. Flames follow race riot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, many dead. 10 square blocks of Negro settlement town laid in ashes and white section also was threatened for time, firemen endangered. Arrest of blacks started trouble, Tulsa, June 1st. Martial law was declared in effect here and in Tulsa County at noon today by State Adjutant General Barrett, following receipt of orders from Governor Robertson directing that the military take over the situation arising from a race clash that broke out last night and continued throughout the night and today. All available National Guardsmen gathered here from all parts of the state were placed on duty at once in Negro Quarter, and orders were issued to disarm all citizens. By the Associated Press, Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st, nearly 10 square blocks of the Negro section of Tulsa, where an armed conflict has been in progress since late yesterday between Negroes and whites, resulting in a reported death list of at least 6 white and 50 Negroes and a rapidly increasing list of wounded, were in flames today. The fire was reported spreading and threatening to wipe out a white residential section in the Standpipe and Sunset Hill additions. Detachments of guardsmen were scattered throughout the city prepared to meet all emergencies with machine guns ready for action. Guards surrounded the armory, while others assisted in rounding up the Negroes and segregating them in the jail, city hall, baseball lot, and other improvised guardhouses. State troops under the command of Adjutant General Barrett arrived this morning, augmenting units of guardsmen who were called out last night. At this time, there were reports of sporadic shooting, and the situation was said to be clearing slightly. Arrest of Negro, cause. The trouble is reported to have been the result of the arrest yesterday of Dick Rowland, Negro, for an alleged assault on an orphan girl. The Negro was spirited away from the jail, and Sheriff McCullough refused to divulge his whereabouts. The first attempt to fire the Negro section came early this morning, when white men openly threatened to destroy the. Continued on page 2.
Indiana Daily Times, June 1st, 1921. Report 50 to 60 dead in race riots. Battle rages many hours in city of Tulsa. Oklahoma troops called out, round up and guard blacks. Under martial law. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st, martial law was declared here by Governor Robertson on the request of Adjutant General Charles F. Barrett, shortly after noon. The governor's proclamation was wired here from Oklahoma City and posted in conspicuous places about the city. Estimates of the total number of dead was raised to 75 when additional bodies of dead Negro men, women, and children were found in the riot area. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st, comparative quiet settled on this city late today, after more than 12 hours of furious race rioting. Burning and pillaging had taken an enormous toll on lives and property. The death toll so far will probably total more than 60 white and blacks. There are 7 known white dead, with probably 60 Negroes shot or stabbed by avenging whites. Hospitals are crowded with wounded. Police estimate 60 whites wounded and probably 200 blacks either shot or beaten. The fire, which has consumed practically all of the Negro section of this city, is now thought to be under control and the whites' residential section will be saved without much loss, fire officials reported. About 10,000 Negro residents. There are 10,000 Negroes in Tulsa, according to latest census figures. Practically the entire number is under guard. A commission of citizens has been appointed to start questioning the Negroes. Authorities estimated 1,500 armed Negroes and 1,000 whites participated in the battle which raged through the streets. Pawnshops, hardware stores, and other places where arms and weapons are sold have been closed by the military forces, and smashed windows of shops boarded up. Dick Rowland, the Negro who was alleged to have attacked the 17-year-old white elevator girl, was still in custody of officials. He was spirited out of the city. Efforts by his friends last night to storm the jail and release him precipitated the riots. Adjutant General takes leadership. State troops, police, armed civilians, and fire department combined under the leadership of ADJ Gen. Charles F. Barrett brought order out of chaos after hours of work. A check of the morgues, hospitals, and through the smoldering ruin of the fire-swept Black Belt placed the toll of the rioters as follows: whites dead, 7, whites injured, approximately 60. Negroes dead, 50, Negroes injured, more than 200. Fire lost practically the entire Negro district of 10 square blocks. The city under martial law. Scores of stores looted for arms. Fire serves to calm rioters. The fire, which started after the rioting had been in progress throughout the night and early morning, was allowed to burn itself out. Although the charred and blackened ruins of hundreds of Negro homes were still smoldering, authorities were confident the fire was under control. The brand was applied by the rioters to the Negro district in many different places. The entire territory was a mass of flames before the fire department was able to start to fight the fire. The fire had the effect of bringing the hundreds of rioters to their senses. They were soon calmed and devoted their attention to attempting to protect their homes. 5 companies of National Guards were believed to have the situation under control, so there would be no further rioting.
Ocala Evening Star, June 1, 1921. Race war in Oklahoma follows an attempt to rape. All-night battle between whites and Negroes progresses far up into today. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1st. Continuous gunfire broke out shortly after daybreak near the Negro Quarter, Tulsa, the scene of all-night race disturbances, in which hundreds of armed whites and blacks participated with death and injury undetermined in number, and the calling out of the Oklahoma National Guard to put down the disorder. Around and above, at dawn 60 or 70 automobiles filled with armed whites formed a cordon completely around the Negro section. Half a dozen airplanes circled overhead. A number of houses along the railroad were fired, but lack of wind prevented the fire spreading to adjoining structures. White riflemen were reported shooting at Negroes and firing into their houses, with the Negroes returning the fire dispiritedly. Late reports placed the number of dead at approximately 15. Throughout the early morning, 500 whites and 1,000 Negroes faced each other across the railroad tracks with much gunfire. The usual course. The trouble grew out of the arrest yesterday of a Negro for an alleged attack on a white girl. The Negro was taken to the courthouse and placed in the jail on the top floor of the building. Early in the night, automobiles containing armed Negroes appeared on the streets headed for the courthouse. The Negroes surrounded the courthouse. Armed white men soon gathered, and fighting began, which rapidly grew into gunfiring. 10 blocks of flame. Nearly 10 square blocks of Negro section of Tulsa, where an armed conflict has been in progress between whites and blacks since early last night, resulting in a reported death list of at least 6 whites and 50 Negroes, and a rapidly increasing list of wounded, were in flames today. The fire is reported spreading and threatening to wipe out 2 white residential districts. At 9 o'clock, 2,000 Negroes had been gathered at the convention hall and were under guard. It was filled, as was the police station. The remainder of those being rounded up are being taken to the baseball park, all under armed guard. Detachments of guardsmen were scattered throughout the city, prepared to meet all emergencies with machine guns ready for action. Guards surrounded the armory, while others assisted in rounding up the Negroes and segregating them in prison camps. Oklahoma's report. Oklahoma City, June 1st. 75 persons have been killed at Tulsa, according to a telephone message to Governor Robertson. Martial law. Oklahoma City, June 1st. Martial law in Tulsa was ordered by Governor Robertson at 11:15 today. Save White Section, Tulsa, June 1st, 1 p.m. Fires continued to rage all morning in the Negro section, but at noon it was believed the white residential section, which was imperiled, would escape.
The Beatrice Daily Express, June 2nd, 1921. Governor orders investigation. Tulsa race riot ends after martial law is declared. Aftermath of race war. Whites dead, 10. Negroes dead, 90. Whites injured, 75. Negroes injured, 200. Destroyed by fire, 12 blocks of residences in the Negro district. Homeless, 8,000 Negroes, 5,000 whites. Cause: alleged attempted rape of white girl by Negro. How quelled: by 4 companies of state militia troops totaling 600 men. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Governor J.B.A. Robertson today ordered a grand jury investigation of the race riots here. Attorney General Freeling will have charge of the investigation to fix the responsibility for the loss of nearly 100 lives and the destruction of property of 8,000 Negroes and 5,000 whites. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Race hatred, which flared up for 24 hours in the oil metropolis of the Southwest, cost nearly 100 lives and $1,500,000 property damage today. Thousands homeless. Whites, who fought a furious battle with practically the entire male black population, centered their efforts to finding shelter for the 10,000 Negroes whose homes were destroyed when the torch was applied. Negroes, who fled from the city when the rioting began Tuesday night, drifted back into town today with pitiful stories of how they stayed hidden in the woods northeast of the city without food and water for 2 days. Farmers rounded up many fleeing Negroes and brought them to detention camps. Practically the entire Negro population spent the night under guard. Over 4,000 blacks spent the night at the fairgrounds. Governor arrives. Governor Robertson, who arrived here Wednesday night, will start an inquiry into the rioting today. The executive kept a closed mouth as he personally went over the scene of the battle. His attention is expected to be directed to the fact that civilian officials were entirely unable to cope with the rioters. The success of martial law in ending the outbreak was marked within a very short time. After martial law was declared, the situation was declared under control. Throughout the night, big motor trucks with dangerous-looking guns patrolled the streets. The streets were ordered cleared at 9 p.m., A campaign to raise money for relief of destitute Negroes was underway today. Several $1,000s had already been subscribed. In addition to 8,000 Negroes made homeless by the fire, approximately 5,000 whites lost everything they owned. Calm after storm. Colonel Barrett was to depart late today with some of his troops. The remainder will be left in Tulsa under Colonel Hurd. The strict military rules are expected to be modified today, although the city will remain under martial law for several days. The soldiers worked hard to save what was left of the once proud city when they arrived during the hottest stage of the riot. Racial feeling had died down today. Negroes crept from their hiding places and resumed their work as porters, bellhops, waiters, and janitors. They went about their duties unmolested. Preparations were made to release thousands of Negroes from the cramped quarters in the Western League Baseball Park and the Dawson Mines outside the city. There was no rush about the process, officers taking time to question every person to learn if he had been connected in any way with starting the riot. There was fear also that the sudden release of a large number of Negroes would start further trouble. A great number of knives and small weapons were taken from the refugees. Guardsmen were ordered to shoot at the first sign of looting. White persons were excluded from the area. A few Negroes were admitted to search in the ruins of their shacks and see if any of their belongings could be found. Smoke still curled from some of the buildings.
The Evening Star, June 2nd, 1921. Tulsa death toll is now put at 50. Troops quell riot. Stocktaking of ruin and loss of life begun by state militia. Thousands of Negroes homeless through fire. Property damage well over $1,500,000. Officials start inquiry into origin of race war. By the Associated Press, Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Outwardly, Tulsa resumed its normal atmosphere today, except for the presence, under a martial law proclamation, of approximately 580 Oklahoma National Guardsmen sent here yesterday after many hours of rioting between Negroes and white men, including a night of incendiarism in which virtually the entire Negro quarter was destroyed with a loss of $1,500,000. Shortly before 10 o'clock, Adjutant General C.F. Barrett announced that the number of state troops here would be reduced today to 250, with the lifting of martial law depending on the apparent ability of city and county authorities to cope with conditions. 9 white men identified. As the situation rapidly quieted down today, the estimates of killed and wounded dwindled. 9 white men dead had been identified today, and 15 Negroes were accounted for. Basis for estimates that still ranged as high as 40 Negroes dead was the possibility of an unknown number of bodies having been destroyed when the torch was applied to the Negro residence district. Casual search of the quarter failed to disclose additional bodies or bones today, but a thorough search by the guardsmen was planned for later in the day. Business houses opened in Tulsa as usual today, and the customary crowds were on the street. From 5:30 o'clock, Negroes began coming from their hiding places and riding or walking to their employment. Some wore a white handkerchief around their arms. Others tagged with a white ribbon badge printed police protection, but many went along unmolested without any marking of disinterestedness. Some of the 35 white injured in hospitals are expected to die. When the military forces searched the burned Negro quarter, a number of Negro bodies are expected to be found. This morning, the bodies of 15 Negroes lay in the morgues. Bodies thrown into river. Belief was expressed by officials that the bodies of all the Negroes killed would not be found, as it was thought that a number were burned in their homes. Then, too, reports were received at military headquarters that a number of Negro bodies had been thrown into the river and others buried outside of the city. Physicians treating wounded Negroes at hospitals said a score could not recover. Military patrols and guards at every principal street corner kept a firm grip on the situation today. Business was virtually suspended last night under a general order issued by Adjutant General Barrett, but stores were permitted to open at 6 o'clock this morning. Citizens were not permitted on the streets last night under the order, and it was strictly enforced by the guardsmen. Anyone who ventured on the streets without a military pass was taken to the guardhouse. A sweeping investigation of the causes leading up to the rioting was expected to get underway during today. Governor takes hand. Governor Robertson, who came here late yesterday, planned to take an active hand. A military commission had the task of fixing responsibility for the outbreak. Outside the horror of killing and wounding in the series of race battles, the situation of thousands of homeless Negroes presented the most serious condition, and one which will give authorities the biggest problem for solution. All that was left this morning of the hundreds of Negro homes bunched in the section fired by white rioters was a blackened waste, a curling column of smoke here and there, and a few shattered walls. An idea of the extent of the destruction in the burned area is gained from the statement that it is more than a mile square. Virtually no buildings escaped. Many were cheap frame dwellings, but more than a score of them were substantial brick business houses. A Negro church recently completed at a cost of $85,000 was consumed by the flames. Loss over $1,500,000. The property loss, according to real estate men, will total well over $1,500,000. Officials, realizing that some hasty measures must be taken for the relief of the thousands of homeless Negroes, set at work today to devise a scheme for providing them with shelter. 5,000 Negroes were camped in the fairgrounds under protection of the militia, and thousands of others who fled out of the city came trickling back. Citizens were called upon to contribute bedding and clothing for relief of the refugees. A civilian committee and the Red Cross provided food and other comforts. One suggestion was to clear away the debris in the old Negro quarter and erect tents there. Since martial law was declared late yesterday, there has been no indication of further conflicts, and observers expressed the belief that the flare of race feeling had died out. There were unsubstantiated rumors at various times of sporadic trouble, but investigation proved them untrue. Bellboys missing at hotels. Trains coming into Tulsa last night brought no Negroes, and the number of white passengers was reduced sharply. On the train arriving here from Muskogee at 1:30 a.m., it was said that 3 coaches generally are crowded and that the entire Negro section usually is filled to capacity. This morning, no Negro passengers alighted, and there were fewer than a score of white passengers. The Negro porter was not permitted to make his usual run, and a white brakeman substituted for him. At the downtown hotels, where Negro bellboys and porters heretofore have been employed, guests were requested to tell the substitute elevator operators their floors and then find their own rooms. Officials hope to clear up by the investigation just what led to the first shooting Tuesday night. A newspaperman who was at the continued on page 2, column 1.
The Daily Ardmorite June 2, 1921. Metropolis of northeastern Oklahoma awakens from day and night of nightmare dreams. Governor will order thorough probing by a special grand jury. Quiet holds in Tulsa after hour of indescribable horror. Military control situation. Train service resumed. National Guardsmen patrol streets with little fear of further trouble. No Negroes on trains. Scenes yesterday beyond description. Seething masses of humanity ebbed and flowed while the ambulances plunged through city streets. By the Associated Press, Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Dawn this morning found Tulsa quiet after a previous night and day of race rioting which claimed the lives of 8 white men and upwards of 100 Negroes, according to official estimates, and wiped out the entire Negro district, entailing a loss of at least $500,000. The city and county were under martial law by proclamation of Governor Robertson, with Adjutant General C. F. Barrett in command. As a result, the streets were deserted and few people were to be seen on the streets under orders which prevent the appearance of anyone except on permission. All business houses and places of congregation were closed except those permitted to remain open, including drugstores and other essential businesses. The National Guardsmen patrolled the streets, but they had little to do other than walk their beats. One call came to headquarters during the night. A mysterious call said that Negroes were congregating at the edge of the Negro Belt, on Little Africa as it is known, but a hasty examination failed to reveal any Negroes in sight. Meanwhile, 5,000 Negroes are being cared for at refugee camps, where they are under strict guard. A check of hospitals revealed scores wounded, some of them in a serious condition, while hundreds of others are reported to have received wounds in a minor nature. A military committee is examining the case of the interned Negroes, and it is expected that many of them will be released soon, as provision can be made for taking care of them in other quarters. The situation presented is a serious one, as their homes have been wiped out entirely by the flames that swept the Negro district clean. Attention was turned today to extending relief to the stricken, and subscriptions to relief funds were being received. Meetings were planned for today to map out a comprehensive plan of relief. Adjutant General Barrett stated that the situation was well in hand and no further trouble was expected. Strict guard will be retained, however, as precaution against any further outbreak, and the troops may be kept here for some time. Main Street, which yesterday morning was a seething mass of armed automobiles and ambulances answering calls to get the wounded, was more like a deserted village street this morning and last night. Only casual automobiles were to be seen, and only few pedestrians were out. Scarcely ever have the streets of the city been so quiet as was the case last night and this morning. Trains coming into Tulsa last night brought no Negroes, and the number of white passengers were reduced sharply. On the train arriving here from Muskogee at 1:30 a.m., it was said that 3 coaches generally were crowded, and that the entire Negro section usually is filled to capacity. This morning no Negro passengers alighted, and there were fewer than a score of white passengers. The Negro porter was not permitted to make his usual run, and a white brakeman substituted for him. Officials hope to clear up just what led to the first shooting Tuesday night. A newspaper man who was at the courthouse at the time said about 25 white men gathered on the south side of the building. 3 of the leaders entered the courtroom. He said, on the top floor of which Dick Rowland, a Negro, was being held for an alleged attack upon a white girl in an elevator of a downtown hotel. Most of the white men were not armed, according to the newspaper man. Sheriff McCullough met the 3 men who entered the building and warned them away, with a declaration that the Negro would be protected at any cost. The prisoner was in a cell at the top of a winding stairway, which continued on page 2, The Disgrace of Tulsa, from Tulsa World. Proud, matchless Tulsa comes before the bar of Christian civilization this day, and with head bowed, the mantle of shame upon her cheek, and we sincerely hope, with deep regret in her heart, ask that she be pardoned the great offense some of her citizens committed during Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. There is not a man worthy of the name whose heart is not afire with indignation against that which has been done. Members of superior race, boastful of the fact, permitted themselves to degenerate into murderers and vandals, permitted themselves to deal their home community the foulest blow it has ever received in its history. Tulsa boasted that she was not Ardmore, and now a negligible number of men have plunged the reputation of the fair city into the depth of infamy. Language is incapable of painting the wrong which has been committed against the community and its peaceful, law-abiding citizens, or of expressing the indignity one inevitably feels towards men incapable of controlling their passions and their prejudices. It is true that the pride of race as well as its prejudices is a consuming fire in the veins of every nationality. On this ground one would like, if it were at all possible, to condone or excuse the hysteria Tuesday evening and night, when the streets of the city were suddenly transformed into a raging torrent of hate-impelled men. The imprudence of the Negroes in arming themselves and visiting the county jail permits something to be said for those who responded to the riot impulse and set out to satiate the blood lust or racial pride. But nothing that the mind is capable of conceiving permits a word of defense or excuse for the murderous vandalism which set in at daylight the next morning. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property, the homes of women and children, black in color, to be sure, but guilty of no other offense, went up in smoke. Semi-organized bands of white men systematically applied the torch, while others shot on-sight men of color. The colored section of the city was wiped out, and a long line of hopeless, destitute, pitiful refugees fled northward from the burning town. The German invasion of Belgium, with its awful consequences, was no more unjustified or characterized with any greater cruelty. In the conflagration, a splendid new church, but recently erected and one of the handsome educational edifices of the school district, was lost. To such property the Vandals applied the torch to make sure of their terrible purpose. The entire race war was as unjustified as it was unnecessary. Because of it, Tulsa is blazoned as a community where tolerance does not exist, where the Constitution of the United States can be enforced or suspended at will, where prejudice and race bigotry rules, and where law and order haltingly flexes a need of outlawry. 10,000 citizens have been rendered homeless and made exiles on the face of the earth. Will Tulsa accept such a reputation willingly? Will this city tolerate such injustice, accept meekly the sudden ending to its dream of primacy and glory? If not, then the substantial constructive citizenship must immediately get into action. There is but one way in which Tulsa can rehabilitate itself, either in its own eyes or the eyes of the outside world. That is, by rebuilding that which has been destroyed. Vandalism has taken the homes and the savings of thousands of people. Tulsa must restore that which has been taken. The sins of comparative few are thus visited upon the whole community. But it is a cross that must be shouldered willingly and heroically. This restitution, not because of affectionate regard for the colored man, but because of an honorable and intense regard for the white race whose boast of superiority must now be justified by concrete acts. Not else can the wounds of passion be healed, or the scars of intolerant hatred be soothed. In this moment, men of Tulsa stand at the crossroads in the city's destiny. One way leads to a greater and more glorious future. The other certainly leads to retrogression and decay. There cannot be any hesitating. Tulsa returns to normal condition as rioting stops. Governor Robertson back to Oklahoma City today. Casualty list increases with the latest reports. By the Associated Press, Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Governor Robertson, who came here from Oklahoma City to assume personal charge of the efforts to restore order, this morning said he felt assured the trouble was over and said that he would return to the capital at 1:30 p.m. The state executive said he intended to insist on a rigid grand jury investigation of the clash. He was noncommittal as to the lifting of martial law, and also as to efforts to establish the exact number of dead and wounded. Despite the lower death reports, the list of wounded mounted gradually as persons who previously had not been treated called on physicians. The approximate number was placed at 240, despite the belief that many more than that number were hurt, but did not report their injuries. The plight of more than 5,000 Negroes under joint guard and protection at the fairgrounds was regarded as serious today. Many of them lost their entire possessions when fire swept their district. It is understood an effort is being made to sift from the Negroes at the fairgrounds those who participated in the initial clash at the county building Tuesday night, when white men, bent on taking from the jail Dick Rowland, 19-year-old bootblack, alleged to have attacked a white girl, met armed Negroes whose intention was to protect Rowland from being lynched. As rapidly as a Negro at the fairgrounds is sponsored by his or her employer, he is given a police protection tag and released. It is hoped in that manner to thin the ranks to where the 5 Negro officers of Tulsa County can identify Negro participants in the riot. As the day wore on Tulsa, assumed an entirely normal appearance, aside from the presence at the street intersections. Continued on page 2. Martial law is still in control, but all is quiet. General Barrett reports Tulsa situation under control. Searching for incinerated bodies by the Associated Press. Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 2nd. Outwardly, Tulsa resumed its normal atmosphere today except for the presence under a martial law proclamation of 500 Oklahoma National Guardsmen, sent here yesterday after 12 hours of rioting between Negroes and white men, including incendiarism, in which virtually the entire Negro district was destroyed with a loss of $1,500,000. Shortly before 10 o'clock, Adjutant General Barrett announced that the number of state troops here would be reduced today to 250, with the lifting of martial law, depending on the apparent ability of city and county authorities to cope with the situation. As the situation rapidly quieted down today, the estimate of killed and wounded dwindled. 9 white men dead had been identified today, and 15 dead Negroes were accounted for. Basis for estimates that still range as high as 40 Negroes dead was a possibility of an unknown number of bodies having been incinerated when the torch was applied to the Negro residence district. Casual search of the quarter failed to disclose additional bodies or bones today, but a thorough search by the guardsmen was on for later in the day. Business houses in Tulsa open as usual today, and the customary crowds were on the streets. From 5:30 o'clock, Negroes began coming from their hiding places and riding or walking to their employment. Some wore white handkerchiefs around their arms. Others were tagged with white ribbon badges, on which was printed, "Police Protection," but many went along unmolested without any marking of disinterestedness.